for this conference. I'm delighted to be a part of this. This is an exciting initiative. As Michael said, I'm a professor and associate dean, and I spend most of my time thinking about three of the most common mistakes that people make in organizations. So those three mistakes are negotiating ineffectively, acting unethically, and sleeping insufficiently. Hopefully none of those describe you, but they're common out there, and they're my focus, and really my passion is the negotiation piece, because I feel that by learning how to negotiate effectively, people can go a long way toward improving both their personal life and their professional life. So with that, let's take it away. This is an interactive session, so I hope you'll consider participating, at least in the chat box, because that'll make it a lot more interesting for all of us. And so just to start off, I'd like to ask you not a would you rather, but a have you ever question. So the first question I have for you here is, in the workplace, which is the skyscraper thing on the left, whatever the workplace looks like to you, in the workplace, have you ever done any of the following? If the answer is yes, just type yes in the chat box, please. Divided up the work, say for a project. So divided up the project work, had to deal with difficult people or requested resources or organizational support. So if that's you, go ahead and type a yes in the chat box. All right, I see a lot of yeses. Now the question is about the marketplace. So somewhere between work and home, have you ever bought a new car, asked for a better rate, say on your cell phone or on your cable bill, or disputed a charge somewhere? If that's you, please type yes. The yeses are spilling in, good. And then the final questions I have for you are, have you ever at home debated with your kids, if you have kids, about bedtime, disagreed with your partner or spouse about a monetary issue, or discussed different vacation options, where to spend your next vacation? All right, so the chat box is exploding with yeses, and I'm glad to see that, because oh no, there's one no out there. Oh, okay, all right, one no, but otherwise exploding with yeses, and I'm glad to see it's generally exploding with yeses, because what that means is all of you have been negotiating all the time. If you've done anything on this slide, you've been negotiating whether you know it or not. Why? Because negotiation occurs anytime you can't achieve your own objectives without somebody else's cooperation. That's a negotiation, or at least you have the opportunity to negotiate when you're in that kind of situation. And so if you take a step back and really think about, how often do I depend on somebody else to achieve something I want? I mean, I don't know about you, but I spend like 95% of my day in that type of a situation. So negotiations are all around us. That's when they occur, but actually, what are they is the question I have for you. So take a moment, please, and think about how you would, randomly define negotiation if somebody came up and tapped you on the shoulder and said, Danielle, Tatiana, Claire, Rebecca, Haley, everybody else out there, if somebody tapped you on the shoulder and said, what is negotiation? What would you say? And once you have an idea, feel free to please type it in the chat box. So the question is, what is a negotiation? What's the definition? Okay, so we're hopefully typing in the chat box. Speaking persuasively to get the turnout to get the desired outcome. Yeah, working toward a mutually beneficial outcome, Emery says. So it's a little more collaborative, cooperative. Spencer, more collaborative and cooperative as well, coming to an agreement about something. Good. So in those responses there, power struggle. Thank you, Emily. Yeah, Emily highlighted the other side of negotiation. And that set of responses, I think you see that negotiation has a cooperative side, and it has more of a competitive side. So Emily's highlighting the competitive side there, the power struggle. Things like collaborative decision making, Spencer, agreement. That's the more cooperative side. But if you just randomly walked out on the street and tap somebody else on the shoulder and ask them this question, I would venture and I would bet, and I've actually done it, that you get the more competitive side of things. So often when you ask somebody what's negotiation, they'll tend toward the competitive side, convincing another party that you're right, they're wrong, so they should do what you want. I'd like to start off by saying that actually is not negotiation, that's persuasion. Persuasion and negotiation are not the same thing. Persuasion is one thing you do when you're negotiating, but negotiations are a lot broader than just persuasion alone. The main difference here, I think, is you can see by looking at the definition of negotiation, which is not just I'm right, you're wrong. It's a decision-making process by which two or more people agree on how to resolve their partially conflicting interests. So key differences here are that it's a process. It's not just kind of I'm right, you're wrong. There's a recognition that there's multiple parties with valid perspectives involved. There's the need for some sort of an agreement in order for the negotiation to conclude successfully. And there's also an acknowledgement that we have conflict, but notice the words partially conflicting, right? So negotiations, the assumption is we'll conflict on some things, but there'll be other things that we might actually agree upon, if only on the need to agree with each other. A simple way to think about this is in terms of two different pictures. Negotiations are both slicing the pie and growing the pie. Slicing the pie on the left is the persuasion part, the part that most people think of, sort of taking a fixed set of resources and carving it up with a giant chainsaw. But negotiation is also the part on the right, growing the pie, that's finding opportunities through the negotiation process to benefit both sides at the same time. And so with that little academic preview there, I want to share with you a couple of stories and hopefully culminate in some tangible advice on how to approach your next negotiation in whatever context that is. So I'll tell you a couple of stories here, and they will point towards some key concepts and fundamentals and strategies. The first story has to do with how most people buy a car. And so even in today's kind of internet day and age, most people when they're looking to buy a car, what they do is they do consult the internet, they figure out what car they want, and they quickly figure out where that car is located, like what dealer has that car in town. And here's the process they follow. They go to that dealer, they see the car, there it is, gleaming in the lights of the showroom. They fall in love with that car. Over comes the dealer. They know they need to negotiate, so they try to negotiate a little bit with the dealer. They might knock over, perhaps not, or knock off, I should say, perhaps like $1,000 off the price. They're feeling good about themselves. They head over to the desk. They sit down at the desk, and at the desk, those of us that have been at the desk, what happens at the desk? Yep, good point, Michael. Microchip shortage. Microchip. And to the chat box comment above that, yes, you do need to negotiate. Persuasion is a part of negotiation, so that's a part of it. The point is just that it's not all of it. But back to what happens at the desk, a lot of back and forth. Add-ons, Gregory's saying. Gregory, I agree, add-ons, right? So the dealer will say like, oh, you want mirrors on that car? I didn't realize that. That's going to be like, $500. You want this to comply with Maryland environmental standards? That's going to be like $700. You want a license plate? That's like $300. And by the time you get through the whole thing, you're at a number that is higher actually than where you started. And then what the dealer does, what does the dealer do then? You've reached a tentative deal. What does the dealer do? No offense if you're a car dealer. I'm just giving you the stereotypical car dealer. What does the stereotypical car dealer do once you think you've reached a deal? Makes you wait. Yeah, tries to upsell you. So Emory, let's assume at this point we've been upsold on everything, but what does the dealer have to do before agreeing to the deal? Typically. Check with the boss. Check with the boss. Thank you. Check with the boss. So those of us that are saying check with the boss, thank you. So that's called ratification. The dealer has to go in back, check with the boss. Typically, the boss comes back and says, I don't think so, right? Or, not quite. So some additional money gets added in. This is a bad situation. This is not how you want to buy a car. And the reason is it doesn't attend to two fundamental core concepts in negotiation. The first one is best alternative is the simple version of it. The acronym is BATNA, best alternative to negotiated agreement. Your best alternative is essentially, what's my plan B if the negotiation is not successful? So in this example, if the dealer plays all kinds of games and throws in additional fees and checks with the boss and so on and so forth, what's my plan B? That matters because your plan B, believe it or not, in a negotiation is your greatest source of power, right? Knowing you can or cannot walk away from the deal and buy the same car somewhere else or on the internet or whatever, that having the option to do that is your greatest source of power. The problem in the story is the hypothetical person in the story hasn't thought through that. There is no BATNA, there is no best alternative. So therefore they have to sort of settle for whatever the car dealer says. So in real life, the key lessons here are you always want to, first of all, know what your best alternative is. In other words, know that, yes, you're going to talk to this dealer, but there's 3 or 4 other dealers in the area that have the same car, if possible, and they're not facing a microchip shortage, as we saw in the chat box. Better yet would be not just to know that, but to grow your best alternative. When I say grow your best alternative, what I mean is don't just go into the car dealer number one, thinking I'm going to reach a deal with this person and drive out in a car. Go into dealer number one thinking, well, I'm going to talk to this person, see what I can get. But then my plan is to walk out of this dealership and walk to dealership number two and see what I can get at dealership number two. That's growing your best alternative, making it as good as it can possibly be. I have a question here about falling in love. So falling in love in real life with one other individual, beautiful thing. Falling in love with one other individual in the movies, beautiful thing. Good idea to fall in love with one car dealer? Maybe type yes or no in the chat box. Good idea, fall in love with one car dealer? See one no. I would not recommend it. I would not recommend it because what that means is you have no best alternative, or at least you haven't thought about what it is. So question here, what about when there isn't really an alternative? You need a car now because your current one is dying, might not even get you to the other dealership. Is the key to just pretend like you're not in that situation? Yeah, I mean, you certainly don't want to, make that apparent to the dealer, right? I would try to avoid that situation at all costs. I mean, I realize sometimes like we get, one job offer and don't have another one lined up. So we can't always avoid that, but to the extent you can avoid it, take an Uber to dealer number two, right? Or have a partner or friend drive you to dealer number two, because you really are in a bad situation when you can't, when you explicitly have no other alternative. By the way, it's best alternative. It's not good alternative, right? I mean, in real life, sometimes we don't have a good alternative, but we always have an alternative. Right. So your alternative in the example that you provided there is to like take your bike and, bike to the other dealer or have somebody drive you there. That's not a good alternative, but it's your best alternative, all things considered. The other key concept here that it wasn't considered in the scenario was reservation price. So reservation price is basically your numerical bottom line. So if you're the buyer of the car, it's the most you're willing to pay for the car. This is related to your best alternative because it should be the value of your best alternative adjusted for any differences between the deals. And so just to make this easy to understand, suppose that you found the RAV4 you're looking for at dealer number two, fell in love with it, determined that it was on sale for $37,500. What was great about this other RAV4 is that it had the sunroof you really want. So you found the RAV4 in red with the sunroof at dealer number two, $37,500. The question is, what's your bottom line for dealer number one when you go back to dealer number one and find the RAV4 without a sunroof? So same car, but no sunroof. Is it $37,500? Is that the maximum, or is there a different number at dealer number one? So if you have a guess in the chat box. What is your reservation price for the car at dealership number one without the sunroof? Yeah, I agree, Katie, different number. So higher or lower than 37,500. It has fewer features. Lower, I'm agree. Yes, Heather, Katie, I agree. I would say something like 37,000 for the first car. So here you see, the value of your best alternative is 37,500, but you've adjusted that for the fact that this car comes, without the sunroof. So key points here are always know what your reservation price is. Never negotiate without knowing what it is. Always stick to it. If you're at the car dealer and your true reservation price is 37,000 and you find yourself saying, well, I guess based on what the car dealer is saying, I can find another $500 lying around. Not a good thing to do. Also not a good thing to do to reveal it. Why would you, what happens if you tell the car dealer, honestly, car dealer, the maximum I will pay for this RAV4 is 37,500. What does the car dealer say? How does the car dealer respond if you honestly admit 37,000 is my maximum? Yeah, so Emery's saying, great, that's the price, I agree. Or maybe like, hey, we got a deal for you, 36,999, right? Or Michael saying, yeah, but worse yet, we will try to get you in that range. So this is a sensitive piece of information and not one that you want to reveal. Moving on to this, so BATNA and best alternative and reservation price are the first two concepts. Moving on to another story, which will introduce another concept here. This is a true story in New York. It's about a person who, as a young man, in the middle part of the 20th century, was a really promising physicist, made some important discoveries that contributed to the space program ultimately. But about in his 30s or so, he had some personal tragedies and sort of decided to give up on life at that point and move into a very small apartment in New York City. He decided to basically be a hermit for the next 30 years. And that's what he did. He just kind of stayed in his apartment, did crossword puzzles. Somebody gave him food through the door, mold went up the walls, like saw nobody, had no friends, had no family, just kind of sad situation. And then in 2004, along came some developers, took a look at the building where he was living and said to themselves, we would love to tear down that old building where this person is living and others are living, knock it down and turn it into New York's most exclusive residence. And so they went to the people who owned their apartments in the building, including this guy and 3 other people. And they said, we'd like you to move out of the building so we can knock this down. Here's $1 million to get you to move out of the building. 3 out of the 4 people said, thank you very much, took the $1 million and left. What do you think this guy said? Any guesses in the chat box? What did this guy say? Yeah, no. Other people agree with Emery? I agree with Emery, and I agree with Assyria. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. No, thanks. This is my home. I'm staying. Yeah, exactly. This guy said, absolutely not. And he said to himself, I'm declaring this my last stand. I've wasted my life. I was such a promising scientist. Now I've wasted my last 30 years doing, my crossword puzzles. I wasted my life. This negotiation is my last stand. I'm going to see how well I can do. We don't know how well we don't know what actually he said in the negotiation, but we know he drove a hard bargain because he was living in this building even while they were knocking it down. So there was like one little column that he would take the elevator up, wrecking ball destroying the rest of the building, him going up to the building. And we know at the end of the day, he got not $1 million, he got $17 million to leave his apartment. In addition to 17, he actually also got another apartment on the other side of Central Park worth $2 million, and he only had to pay $1 per month in rent. So, last time I checked, $17 million plus a $2 million apartment is better than $1 million. The point of this story is reservation price is important. Your bottom line is important, but you also need to know your aspiration point, your target, which is an optimistic but realistic goal. So your reservation price is kind of your bottom line. Your aspiration is your top line. It's what you're really shooting for as well. And this kind of pattern is borne out by research. Just to share with you one study, this was a negotiation class where half the students were told in the class, focus on your aspiration. The other half of the students were told, focus on your reservation price, your bottom line. This kind of effect has been replicated over and over again. The people that just in their own head were focusing on their aspiration, what they wanted, did a lot better for themselves. And this is probably one of the most well-replicated and documented findings in negotiation. And it's powerful because you presumably control what goes on in your head, right? The only difference between the two conditions here is what's going on in the people's head. So to the extent you can stay focused on your aspiration while negotiating, that's really what you want to do. So the point is, do define your reservation price before a negotiation, but while you're negotiating, you really want to be focused on your aspiration. Another key point here, which we can go into in more details in the Q&A if you would like, is, contrary to what you find if you just Google, should I make the first offer? Actually, yes, generally speaking, you should make the first offer in a negotiation, and you should use your aspiration to do that, right? So if your goal is to buy the RAV4 for, $28,000 and you think that's a reasonable number, you should feel free to say, Mr. and Mrs. Dealer, $28,000. Now, I realize that the sticker price sort of is the first offer in that particular context. In another context, like getting a job, you don't have the ability to make a first offer. The employer does that. But in many situations, you do have the opportunity, and you do want to take the opportunity to make the first offer because it focuses the other side on what you want and sort of not on what they want. Final story and final key set of concepts here relate to, this is a fictional story, but a good story. Typically in the past has been called The Two Sisters in the Orange. I have rebranded it as The Two Siblings in the Orange to take out the gender factor here. So the story is that we have two siblings who are home alone in a house one day, and it's Sunday, it's raining outside, it's sort of late in the day, so all the shops are closed. They go into the kitchen, they see in the kitchen only one orange in the refrigerator. Both of the siblings lay claim to the orange. They both want the orange. They start fighting about it. Words are exchanged, angry emotions are expressed, so on and so forth. Eventually they get tired about fighting over the orange. So they cut it in half. One sibling takes their half to this side of the room. starts squeezing it to make orange juice. The other sibling takes their half to this side of the room and starts taking the peel off to garnish a cake. What's wrong with that story? Half an orange making orange juice over here, half an orange garnishing a cake over here. What's the problem here? Yep. Rebecca doesn't like oranges. Okay. But I'm agreeing with Emery. They didn't talk. They could have both had everything they wanted. They didn't talk specifically about what their goals were, what they were actually trying to get out of the negotiation. They both could have had more, right? One could have had the entire inside of the orange and one could have had the entire outside of the orange. And so this relates to the distinction between positions and interests. Positions in a negotiation are what you're asking for. Like, I want the orange. No, I want the orange. Interests are why you're asking for it. What are your underlying needs, motivations, goals, and objectives? Positions and interests can be depicted like an iceberg. Those are kind of crummy icebergs, but it's the best clip art I could find with an iceberg. Essentially, the positions are what stick out of the water because they're what you say and what you hear. So in this example, both siblings are wanting the whole orange. You can see that if the conversation is just about positions, that doesn't go very well and it results in just cutting the thing in half. But their interests are very different. Sibling 1 wants to make orange juice. Sibling 2 wants to decorate a cake, right? So to the extent they can find a way to move below the water to the part that isn't visible to what they're really trying to do, that's a much more productive conversation. And so final two key concepts here I want to introduce you to are interests. And the point about interests, interests again are your goals, your motivations, your objectives. You want to stay focused on interests and not on positions. The problem is people are very wedded to and focused on their positions in negotiation, right? Like it's easy to argue about the price of a car. It's easy to argue about, something explicit, some explicit term in a negotiation. It's harder to understand both what's really driving you and important to you and what's really driving and important to them. To do that, here the most reliable technique to do that is to ask a very simple set of questions. And the questions are either why or why not. Those are the three most powerful words in the English language when they relate to negotiation. So the advice here would be in the future, when you're fighting with another party about your positions, take a step back and ask why. Why are you taking why do you want this orange? Why are you taking that position? Why is that so important to you? Or why not? Why is that offer not acceptable to you? By asking those three words, I think you'll find that the conversation, quickly shifts from positions to interests. And by the way, for those of you that have kids, asking why is, a lifesaver. You'll be amazed how often you can ask the question why and prevent sort of, World War III, either between you and your kid or between kids. Kids have motivations, and asking why really helps you to understand, the source of those motivations. The reason we do that is because by asking why and focusing on interests, you can discover trade-offs, right? You can discover, for example, I want the inside of the orange, you want the outside of the orange. Last key concept also relates to the two siblings in the orange, and that is perspective taking. So perspective taking is simply trying to understand the world through somebody else's eyes, through the eyes of the person you're negotiating with. The two siblings in the example didn't do that, right? They did not try to do that. They did not try to understand what's going on, what's motivating the other sibling. Had they done that, they would have discovered actually one sibling wants the inside, one sibling wants the outside. This is really important to take the other side's perspective. It's better to do that than to be self-focused like the two siblings were in the example. Believe it or not, it's better to do that even than being empathetic with the other side, which is sort of emotionally identifying with the other side. Why? Because by simply trying to understand what's going on in their head rather than their heart, you avoid being kind of overly emotional and overly wrapped up in their situation. And so the advice here is to try before the negotiation to guess what the other side's situation is. So if you are a sibling and you know your sibling likes to make orange juice, you can probably guess that that's why they're going to want the orange. And update during the negotiation when you're there, ask them simply, do you want this orange because you want to make some juice? This results in what I hope is a really useful tool. The 5 concepts I just shared with you are in the chart: best alternative, reservation price, aspiration, interests, and negotiation counterpart relates to perspective taking. The advice in this chart, what I'm trying to show you here is before every negotiation you ever do, fill out the chart. right? Think critically for yourself. What is my best alternative? As a result, what is my reservation price? Aspiration, what am I really shooting for? Interest, what am I really trying to obtain? Underlying goals and objectives. But critically, take a wild guess for my counterpart. I may not have met my counterpart. I may not know a lot about my counterpart, but it's amazing by doing some research, talking to your network, just doing some critical thinking, how much you can actually guess about your counterpart. Let me just conclude here with an example of how you can use this sort of a chart in a realistic negotiation. So here's the scenario. Everybody kind of read and think critically. Imagine that you have a job in Baltimore and you like it. The $75,000 salary that you currently have is competitive. You can often work remotely and otherwise walk to the office, which is attractive, and most of your coworkers are pleasant. However, there's a recruiter down in DC who hears about the solid work you're doing up in Baltimore and approaches you about another job. You don't know what that other job pays, but you suspect it could be more because of the Great Resignation and the specialized skills they're seeking. But you know that you have to go to DC all the time, which is not attractive, and you're not so crazy about one of the people that you're going to work with. So the bottom line here is, while this new job may be better for in terms of pay and also stretch your skills, you're a little bit concerned about having to get on the mark all the time and about the disagreeable coworker that you expect. And so just kind of looking forward and to your expected job offer and knowing you'll need to negotiate the salary, I would encourage you to use your brain. And by use your brain, I'm not being a jerk. I'm again referring to the chart here. Simply try to fill out the chart. So here's my attempt at the chart based on that scenario. Your best alternative for the negotiation with over the new job would be to stay at your current job. You would consider that attractive in the scenario and it's valued at $75,000, but really it's attractive because you like your coworkers and it's easy to get to the office. You can work remotely, so on and so forth. Note that your reservation price for the new job is not $75,000 because it's kind of crummy, right? You have to go to DC and you have to work with people you don't like. So what you're saying here is, perhaps, I would only accept that new job if they would pay me more than my current salary, maybe $100,000. $100,000 is your bottom line, but it's not your aspiration. Your aspiration is what you really want. You might say to yourself, what I really want here is $125,000. By the way, you get to that number by trying to estimate what's the highest they would possibly go, their reservation price. Your interests here are primarily to work at a place you like, learn new skills and make money around the list, but they're not as important as quality of work life. You've also taken a guess at your negotiation counterpart situation. Their best alternative is to hire somebody else, and that's probably not very attractive given the details of the scenario, Great Resignation and need for specialized skills. You've taken a guess at their reservation price, their aspirations, their interests as well. So just taking a look at this chart here and thinking critically about the situation, should you be sort of aggressive in this negotiation over the new job, or should you be sort of, meek in this negotiation over the new job? So everybody, I know we're tired of voting after voting last week, but everybody in the chat box cast a vote. Be aggressive or not be aggressive. Yeah. So I'm agreeing with the people in the chat box. I would be pretty aggressive. I would be pretty aggressive because you have a good alternative. They have a bad alternative. You like how things are going. This job sort of came out of the blue. You like how things are going. You don't need to accept it. You would only accept it if they compensated it through a much better salary. So my conclusion here would be sort of go big or go home in this negotiation. And with that, I think if I'm not mistaken on the time, do I have till 5:25? Is that right? Or am I already out of time here?
Yep, you have till 5:25.
Okay. So I have felt till 5:25. I'll stop sharing and happy to take any questions. There might have been one or two in the chat box that I missed as we were flying through here. So Michael, if you caught any, feel free to bring those to my attention.
So one question that was asked is, should your first offer be above your aspiration, or is that a bad recommendation?
Your first offer should be slightly above your aspiration, but it should not be crazy. So there's research on, what do I do if my aspiration for this new job is 125,000 and I go in and ask for 500,000, that's crazy, right? That's way out of line with my target. There's research showing that the other side's likely to walk away from the deal if you do something like that. So you might say 126, 127, but I wouldn't say 500,000. By the same token, I wouldn't say 75,000, right? So you make a first offer with your target, with your aspiration in mind, not with your reservation price in mind. Were there any other questions in the chat box that I didn't catch here?
No, it seems like you got all the ones in the chat box. Feel free for those online to either type your question in the chat or raise your hand if you have any questions.
I see Sarah has a question.
Hi, thank you for this presentation. My question is about the BATNA, which is your plan B. What if you kind of find a position that you like, and then having to find a plan B means that you need to continue exerting kind of efforts to find alternatives. So what do you suggest that the person continues to kind of apply and try to create other alternatives to be in a better negotiating position, or accept the fact that their BATNA may not be super strong, but that is kind of okay because they have like a place that they kind of are looking forward to.
So are you referring specifically to a job context?
Yes.
I would say that, I'm not, I don't just negotiate to negotiate, right? I mean, it's not, negotiation has a cost for you and it has a cost for the people that are around you. And so I wouldn't negotiate with somebody else if you have no intention of accepting that job. With that said, it's always good to have a BATNA, or it's always good to at least think about what your BATNA is, right? So I would suggest if you're happy where you are or happy with an offer you've received, you don't have to go negotiate with anybody else, but at least kind of think about what that other thing would be if you had to fall back on it, and be aware that if you don't have another offer in hand, you are in a sort of a compromised position when it comes to negotiating the salary, right? Because if there's no other offer in hand, then you sort of don't have much of a fallback other than to say, okay, I'll accept the offer if they really kind of stick to it.
Okay, thank you.
We have time for one more question. So there's a question in the chat that says, how many alternatives is too many alternatives? Should you just focus on one alternative?
You never have too many alternatives, right? Alternatives are a wonderful and a beautiful thing in life. So there's never too many alternatives, but you only have one best alternative, right? So I would develop, if you can, I would develop multiple alternatives, because that gives you lots of different options and things to think about. But among those alternatives, you always want to think about, which one's your best alternative, because that'll really be your decision point about, is this a good deal, or is this a bad deal, and should I walk away and exercise my best alternative?
Great. Well, thank you so much, Brian. We unfortunately at the end of the session, we have a hard out here at 25, but thank you so much for your time, and thank you everyone for attending.
My pleasure. Please stay in touch.